Okay, lovely. So, my name is Cara Jones. I'm from Waunfawr Primary. So, to begin, a bit about the school itself. We are a really small primary school. We are an English medium primary school, and we're in the Cross Keys village in Caerphilly County Borough. Um, as I said, we're quite small. We've got about 176 pupils, aged 3 to 11, including nursery, on roll. And because of our size as well, most all of our classes on an annual basis are mixed age classes. So this year we did have two mixed age classes that were trialing the Hockman method strategies. We've got a smaller than national average free school meals percentage, and we are mainly English as the first language with a very small minority of EAL. And we've got a below national average ALM percentage at the moment as well. So we're coming up about 14% as additional learning needs pupils. And we were last inspected in 2017. Oh, there we go. I think I can move it. Was that me? Okay. So the rationale for
No,
us.
no, sorry, I wasn't you. It hasn't
No,
moved for
it hasn't
anybody else, I
moved.
don't think.
Okay.
There you go.
I thought I got lucky then. Yes. No. Yeah, next slide, please, for the rationale.
Okay, it's on.
Lovely, thank you. So yeah, our rationale for trialing the Hockman method and the strategies was in part due to the outcome of our 2017 ESTED inspection, where it was determined that not enough of the pupils in Key Stage 2 were engaging with correct and accurate spelling and punctuation. So that was one of the main driving forces for us trialing the writing revolution and the Hockman method strategies in year 4, 5, and 6, but also that our standards of written English were quite poor. They were very conversational. The sentence level understanding wasn't there. And these were our COVID cohorts as well. So we felt that there were some gaps in their knowledge and understanding. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So in terms of who we chose, we went across the two classes, years 4 to 6. We had one more able year 4 pupil, and then we had 2 year 5s and then 3 year 6s. Now, year 6s were some of the lower ability children then as well. And just to sort of see if it had an equally positive impact, we chose one of our year 5 pupils as an EAL learner as well, whose first language at home is Indian. And then we had sort of a 50-50 split in terms of male and female learners as well. And as I said, these were our COVID cohorts. So they missed quite a lot of in-person teaching during their formative education. And we had the children then with very informal written tones and just limited understanding basically of the components of a sentence, and almost an excessive use of the word and when they're creating extended pieces of writing. Can I have my next slide, please? Thank you. So when it came to the sort of broad range of the learners that we decided to focus on as part of the case study, because they had quite broad needs, we had quite a broad inquiry question, because we knew that the needs in the respective classes were slightly different. So we just went with how could implementing just general sentence level strategies from the Hockman method support the pupils' writing skills. Next slide, please. Thank you. And we were hoping to see as our outcome better capitalization in sentences, better independent use of punctuation, especially full stops, and using those accurately as well. Beginning to extend the sentences using a broader range of connectives, not just and then having that better basic understanding of what requirements are needed in a sentence, like your subject, your predicate, and then connectives as and where appropriate. And we assessed the progress of our case study pupils through their extended written pieces in our literacy genres in our literacy lessons, more so than across the curriculum and in topic, although we had elements of our topic learning weaved into our approach to how we trialed the methods, essentially. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of the leadership roles, obviously, as I said, we engaged with this inquiry and the training due to that ESTEM feedback. The year 5-6 teacher is our school deputy head anyway, and she's currently the literacy AOLE lead. And both of us, myself as a middle leader as well, so we're both within sort of the leadership teams within the school. So we knew that we could then be trialing these strategies and methods with the position to be able to feed back to colleagues and hopefully implement change going forward as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how we decided to trial our methods, and during the presentation, I'll focus mostly on how I personally was able to trial them within my class, but generally across both classes, how we trialed it was we did it through a daily on the boil warm-up activity. So it was very short burst. We introduced an element of the Hockman method strategies, and then we kept that on the boil then until we felt that our learners had some success in that method before we were to progress on to what would, systematically come next in the sort of overview of the methods that you deliver. So it was daily, it was on the boil. We would always go through how we had done in that warm-up as a class. Pupils were able then to self-assess, do any editing, feedback to teachers as well, so we could have a better assessment and gauge of how the learners were getting on with the specific method itself. We would always make sure that we would model it first and introduce it in a slightly longer session to begin with. So, for example, if I were to be introducing the connectives, it would be a slightly longer warm-up where I model it myself first and then the children would attempt it independently. Or it may just be that instead of a traditional warm-up for that session, our warm-up would have been me trialing and modelling one of the new methods that we were trying for that week, for example. Next slide, please. So this is just an example, as you can see, between the two classes of how we sort of got the strategy that we were working on at the time into our daily warm-up. We would weave it in with elements of spelling and grammar as well, but it would make sure then that it was challenging and progressing the learners in terms of the sentence level understanding, as well as working on things that we knew that they needed as well in terms of spelling and grammar. Next slide. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So the next few slides are just an example of, for me in my class personally, what I introduced and when, and then it's actually the children's completed versions of those warm-ups, so you can start to see how they're developing an awareness of correct capitalization. You can see in this example, we started with the sentence and the fragments, starting to help or trying to get the children to understand when a sentence was a completed sentence and not just a shorter phrase or a fragment. And they were starting then to develop and build on how they would take that fragment into a fuller sentence. So this is just in my class. This is my year 4 male pupil and my year 5 male pupil, both quite able, but you can see that they're acknowledging where the capitals need to be, they're editing capitals out, they're identifying then sentences and fragments, and you can see that they're starting to correct my incorrect capitalization as well. So that was the first approach that we took, started from the very beginning with our sentences and our fragments. Next slide, please. I think this is just another example then of the pupil again, where he's correcting the capitals, identifying the fragments, and underneath then in his book, he's starting to expand on the fragments and putting them into the full sentences. Next slide, please. Oh, another one there. Thank you. I think this is just a further example, same pupil, and we can see then, you can see my very explicit instruction. Read the instruction, give me a sentence underneath with the fragment that you've identified in it, basically. And you can see that in the blue pen is their self-marking or their self-assessment of how they've done. So where they've made a mistake, obviously they've corrected it, and then they're able to expand and build a sentence underneath. Next slide, please. So coming into autumn 2 and then going into the beginning of spring 1, because I felt that the children in my class were getting a better grasp of sentences and fragments. They were becoming much more independent in identifying incorrect capitals and putting in full stops accurately. I sort of progressed them then into one of the other strategies for the Hockman method, which was the simple conjunctions and then unscrambling sentences. To begin, the unscrambling of the sentences was quite tricky. What we tried to do in my class was I tried to weave whatever the topic learning was at that time into the literacy warm-ups. So I think the reason that my learners found the unscrambling the sentences quite tricky was because it was based on an element of topic that we hadn't quite come to grasp with yet. We didn't fully understand it. So because they didn't have the subject knowledge there, they weren't able to unscramble a sentence and put it into its proper order. But what I did find is obviously when I gave them sentences of things that they were familiar with, they were a lot more successful in unscrambling them. If it was like school related scrambled sentences, for example, about teachers or lessons, they were a lot more successful in unscrambling them and putting them in the right order. And again, you can see my example there. I tried to keep the conjunctions very much on the subject of school. So each of my sort of conjunction activities was discussing a different teacher and their different hobbies. So they already knew the context and the subject basically, and they just knew that they had to worry about using the correct conjunction. Before I introduced this, obviously as an introduction to the conjunction activity itself, we went through, how the conjunctions are different, what they actually mean within the sentence, that they're not all similar to and to help them remember it as well, because I've got 4-5 with a range of sort of abilities in there. We would put actions to them as well. So very much similar to Pike or But, where we have but, and then we have, because is your effect of something. So we would do an equal sign, just to help them remember really what the meaning of that conjunction is before they start to use it in a wider sentence. Next part, please. Thank you. And then this is just the other pupil there. Slightly different warm-up, but you can see again we've got the scrambled sentences and the conjunctions, which they were much more successful with using the correct basic conjunctions than unscrambling the sentences, until obviously we started to get that subject knowledge there then as well with the topic that they were trying to unscramble. Next sentence, please. Thank you. So in spring 2, obviously we regularly visit the previous strategy. So every now and again we'd bring back in the sentences and the fragments, the correct conjunctions, but then we were also introducing and embedding the next strategy in the Hoffman method, which for us was the different sentence types. So again, you can see that the daily warm-up, we've kept the elements of spelling and grammar in there, but we've also got the section where we're looking at that Hoffman strategy. I would give sentence types, and then they would have to identify whether it was a statement, question, exclamation, and a command. And as we would do every day, we'd go through them then as a whole class. We'd discuss any misconceptions as well. So, or if there were some sentences that could be a statement, but also potentially an exclamation, we'd have all of those discussions as they were coming up. And then the children would be able to sort of self-assess. And if I was missing the correct punctuation, so oftentimes you can see on the example there, I haven't put the punctuation. Oftentimes they would put the correct punctuation at the end then as well. So they would start to know that a question sentence type needs a question mark, for example. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then again, example there. So the next few slides are just our baseline pieces. So as I said, we assessed through our literacy AOLE, so it wasn't through our topic, and it was quite ironic at the time because many of our genres were fiction genres more so than non-fiction, but luckily for us we've still seen some progress in the quality of the written language coming through, even though it wasn't quite the right genre of writing for the Hoffman strategies per se. So pupils A to C are the year 4-5 learners, and then pupils E to F are the year 6 learners. And the pupils that I chose mostly had that really conversational, informal written tone. So that was the reason that I selected those 3 as sort of my case study pupils. Whereas pupils E to F, which were the year 6 learners, the lower ability year 6 learners, had the very limited sentence structure understanding. And you can see that in the baseline pieces, there's lots of and. And that's between the two of us, that's what we were sort of addressing then across the 2 classes. So next slide, please. So this is a narrative piece, a spy story from pupil A. Very informal, conversational, chatty tone. There was lots of modelling for some of the more structured sentences in this piece. So where you've got some examples where it doesn't seem that conversational, actually that was because there were sentence starters or modelling or shared writing that supported that. But much of his independent writing was very chatty and conversational. Next slide, please. Then this is pupil B again, same genre, so a spy story. You'll notice some of the sentences are similar because, as I said, it was that sort of shared right, modelled, structured pieces. And then the parts that are his independent rights within that are quite conversational and very chatty. Bob went there with fear in his eyes, but there were 3 guard dogs, but Bob still had 4 hot dogs with him. Lots of but, lots of and he chucked it and gobbled them up, ran for his life and chased the robbers. So again, evidence of the run on there, but also that it is quite conversational and very sensationalist, as if, you know, when they tell you a tale at playtime, it's very much has that sort of tone to it, more so than a formal written story. Next slide, please. And then this is pupil C, who's our EAL learner. And again, she had that very chatty, conversational tone to her writing, even with that modelling and things in place. And lots of the repetition of and things as well. Next slide, please. So going into the year 6 learners, so these are the learners that were identified because of the regular use of and, limited full stops and capitalization in the appropriate places. This is just a short paragraph, so a very short example of sort of her independent writing before we trialled all of those methods, essentially. So capitalization isn't there, and trees and animals, and the sunset, and it would be a dream. So it's just the repetition and the lack of awareness of where her sentences are, essentially. Next slide. Very similar again. So this is another learner, and you'll be able to glance at lots of and. I mean, I think I can see 1 full stop in there, 1 capital letter. Next slide, please. And then this was the final year 6 pupil. So this was the only male year 6 pupil, the other 2 were females. And again, you've got a similar situation here where capitalization and full stop where it is present was probably done retrospectively after the class teacher were to say what's missing here, or if read it out loud where you think your full stop needs to go, you need to pop it in, sort of thing. So very limited awareness really of what substituted a full sentence and where they needed to punctuate, essentially. Next slide, please. So these are examples of the work that we've taken in spring, so just before Easter, after trialing the strategies like your sentences and your fragments, your sentence types, unscrambling the sentences. I know that in the year 5-6 class, they did a lot on subject and predicate. And then we were able to sort of assess where they were, essentially, with their learning. So if we could have the first example for me. So this is that first pupil, pupil A. You'll see we've got better capitalization, better structure to the writing as well. We've got some clear paragraphs. We have less of a chatty tone. Still sometimes that chatty tone coming through, but this is a year 4 pupil. But we've also got a better use and a bit of a range of conjunctions in here. So I can see but, or they could see, so that's being used accurately. We still have and in here, but probably less frequently than we would have before. So we felt that to us, when we saw an example of writing like this, it showed that those strategies were starting to make an impact on the learner's writing. If we could have the next slide, this will be our next pupil. So this is pupil B. And again, so both a narrative genre, but we can see that we've got better capitalization, better punctuation. And I was so happy because they were doing the capitals and the full stops mostly independently, and I could pull my hair out with the amount of times that I tell the children to remember their capitals and their full stops. So that was definitely coming through. They were recognising that names needed that capitalisation more independently than before. And again, we just got a bit of a range of how they start in their sentences and a less conversational tone to the writing. If we have the next slide. And this was, so this has gone straight to pupil E, sorry. So this was one of the year 6 pupils. You can see that the extended writing is a lot better. We've got clearer capitalization, full stops. We don't have and with a run on and all of the sentences being one big sentence, essentially. We've got some of the other conjunctions in there. So we've got so, after, when. So the quality of the writing has been a lot better. Next slide, please. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I've jumbled it up. So this is Pupil C. And this was actually a summer one piece. So this is an example of a biography hot write from Pupil C. And you'll see that the tone is a lot less chatty and conversational than before. This learner is quite chatty and conversational in the way that she writes in her books anyway, even when it comes to self-assessing. She'll often say, oh my goodness, I've done really well in this. So she's a very expressive, conversational child anyway. That's why within her writing, it was very clear that she was very chatty and conversational. But I feel this shows that the good progress and the impact of the strategies for her, because we've just got very formal tone of writing here, these are the sentences, she's not adding her opinion, she's not making it flowery and conversational. So it's shown a good impact for her. Next slide, please. And then this is Pupil F. This is just got an example as well of the introduction of the SPO. So I know that in the year 5-6 class, they started to introduce the SPO shortly before Easter to help support the children with their extended writing. I know you can't really read the writing so much there, but I know the approach was they did a shared SPO that went into their book, supported a paragraph, and then they tried one as a group, and then they tried one independently, and they wove that into actually writing their extended piece as well. So that was on sort of every page, and they did their extended writing piece over a period of time. Next slide, please. And then this is Pupil D. I'm really sorry, all my pupils are the wrong way around. It's really bugged me that I haven't gone in A, B, C, D, E, F order, never mind. Again, so a low ability year 6 pupil, but in the first example, in that baseline, it was and. And then we can see here that we've got some sort of time connectors, we've got full stops, we've got not necessarily independent capitalization, but I'm confident that they would have been identifying those together. So when the teacher would have been feeding back and feeding forward for that learner, it would have been what's missing here, and then the pupil would have identified essentially. So it wasn't that the teacher was coming around and saying, this is missing a full stop. I know that they would have done it together. And we've also got some commas in there as well, where you've got your different clauses within the sentence. Next slide, please. So as a bit of an evaluation as well, I conducted just a really short listening to learners across the two classes. The year 4-5 class is in purple, their responses, and the year 5-6 is in red. They are generalised questions because I know that the strategies were slightly different between the two classes, and the time when we introduced them was slightly different between the two classes, which is why some of my pupils were able to answer some of the questions and some of the other pupils weren't quite able to answer the questions when I did the listening to learners essentially. But I borrowed like sort of sentence examples from some of the exemplar case studies that were on the Teams page as well. And you can see there that they've got a better understanding of the different types of sentences that there are, and what a sentence needs to have. You can see the difference in terms of my pupils and the year 5-6 pupils who had more input on subject and predicate than mine. As when I did the listening to learners with them and I said, what does the sentence include? What does it need? They were able to say subject, predicate, whereas mine were just capital letters, full stops, sometimes a connective, and nouns. We didn't really focus on the subjects and predicates so much within my classroom. Next slide, please. So as I said, we sort of assessed how they got on by spring 2, early summer 1. And it did show to us that actually many of the strategies were effective. We've got the small incremental changes in the quality of the children's work. I think it really helped that we had the on the boil nature of these strategies as well. It wasn't sort of once a week and then hoping for the best. We kept it regular, and we kept feeding forward with the learners as well. And definitely the improved punctuation and capitalization across both classes. And then in year 5-6, we had the SPO being introduced. Our next steps in terms of the school in general, because of our leadership positions, we know that we're in a good position to share with our sort of partner teachers now for the next academic year. So we have moved around a little bit, so I know that I'm able then to share my knowledge and understanding with a new staff member, and vice versa. The other teacher is able to share it with somebody who hasn't had the training as well. And we really want to embed the practices. So I know going forward now with my new cohort of children, I'm going to be starting those warm-ups, straight away. I'm going to be introducing these strategies straight away so that I don't have the delay in the progress that the children can make with the methods in place. And I'm also obviously just making sure that I'm still following sort of the progression of what my current class needs. So I've started to introduce SPOs within my class for the extended writing, and we're also looking at, from this week, I think it is, this week and last week, we've even started looking at subordinating conjunctions now. So I'm always sort of progressing them on into the next strategy and step for the Hockman method. Next slide. This is just an example of sort of how I would do my midterm literacy planning. So towards the beginning, I sort of have what my SPAG next steps need to be based on what I've done previously, and any sort of TWR strategies that I've trialed already, and then what my next sort of strategy that I'm aiming to work through would be next. And then this is just an example of some of the warm-ups that I've had in the past week or so. So I've got, my elements of spelling and grammar at the top, but then my blue is my TWR strategy, which is my subordinating conjunctions now based on where I've sort of mapped what my learners need next. And as with this, we did it as a bit of an extended warm-up to begin with, lots of modelling with them, lots of explaining how it works and where the conjunction can come, noting the importance of the comma as well after it. And they're doing quite well with this strategy as well, and they're enjoying it quite a lot too. Next slide. Just to finish, I did want to put in some sort of personal reflections as well. We did originally go through the training really quickly. We had to go back retrospectively to sort of remind ourselves of what the strategies were to enable us to sort of introduce them incrementally and give them time to embed. A big impact for me that's been really, really helpful is the improvement in the punctuation and capitalization. I used to spend most of the session reminding children about full stops and capital letters, and the fact that many of them now are doing this with a fair degree of independence and with accuracy has been really, really helpful. And the fact that we did it every day on the boil in very short burst sessions has been really helpful for me and the learners as well, because obviously we're just keeping it on the boil and making sure that we're not sort of dropping off on any of our skills and understanding. And I think, next slide, I think that's everything. So thank you for listening.